The Collective Whisper Podcast with Simon King.
Hello everybody, I'd like to welcome Paul Kilgannon from Clare Galway. Paul Kilgannon is a coach, educator, author and creator of the CARVER framework. He has particular interest in youth sports coaching. He consults with sporting organisations and clubs as well as corporate entities in relation to creating learning and performance environments. He also has a new book out called Be the Best You Can Be in Sport. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thanks, Simon. Happy to be here. A little out of my comfort zone in that most of the interview podcasts and stuff I do is just solely on coaching and that. So I am both excited by today and a little, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, don't worry. We won't grill you too hard. But so, are you very busy at the moment with everything?
What do they say? Sometimes busy is the new lazy. Some people that say they're busy are lazy. And another fella said to me one day, he says, you're probably not as busy as you think, but I am medium busy at the minute. Yeah, medium busy at the minute.
Yeah, well, that's not a bad complaint.
Yeah, I have a few creative things that I'm trying to work on at the minute, and I find that I'm not, the engine isn't moving as hard as it needs to at the minute to get through things. So probably the Christmas break, I just finished a book too, and they leave scars in my experience. So I'm probably just I'm just getting back to the engine cranking up again, and I'm moving again. Yeah, I'm moving again.
Yeah, and tell us, at the moment, are you? Is there homeschooling in your house, or is there? Are you all working from home?
Yeah, well, I live alone, so but there still is homeschool. There still is homeschooling because I'm a teacher. I job share in teaching, so I work week on, week off, and I'm involved in learning support. My lady's in America at the minute, so I'm alone at the minute. So so that kind of works out okay for me when I'm working and my head is down. But there is a bit of homeschooling going on. Yeah, I job share, so I work week on, week off as a primary school teacher as well. For now, and there's always work, homeschool, everything.
Yeah, I suppose now teachers are getting greater appreciation for the work they do. Now that parents can see, what it entails and the sacrifices they have to make sometimes, because I saw a post the other day on Facebook where one woman said, when I was young, I used to say to my teacher, what do we need mathematics for? What will we need it for when we're older? And little did I realize we would need it to teach our own kids at home.
Yeah, well, the long and the short of it is society is only going to be as strong as the education it provides its youth. So the better the teaching structures and the better teaching you have in a country, the better the country is going to be. So education is the way forward in all, in sport, in everything, and developing articulate and intelligent people is the measure of any society. So yeah, teachers are important for sure, and good ones are very valuable for sure.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the thing with teaching, as you said. There are lots of good ones out there, but there's some that are only in it to try it out. So I suppose maybe those ones will get found out during this whole process,
Maybe, yeah. But I suppose before now, it's like every profession. I don't see teaching as a job for life anymore. I think it'll be more transient than that. And perhaps in the past, people would have stayed in teaching because, it was a pensionable job, or there wasn't many more options, or, they were only qualified to do a certain thing. But I would see it now. Teaching will be a job that people mightn't do all their lives anymore. They might do a while. It can be tough after a while, when you're young and you've all that energy and you've all that enthusiasm, and it can be tough. It can be a tough job for people. So I can see people moving in and out of it, and that's probably good for education. People staying in the same thing just because keep on keeping on probably isn't a great thing.
Yeah, I noticed that here because I've been a teacher here since I came here, and obviously I was teaching music in Ireland, but the one thing was for me, I was teaching 3 years here of third level or second level education, in secondary schools, and I noticed that a lot of the teachers in Spain will stay in the job for years. They will stay for 20 and 30 years, and it's like a vocation, but more often than not, for the ones who don't love the job, it's more about the stability and the salary and staying in that job and being safe. And they'll kind of look at you if you say, "Oh, I have enough of this. I'm going to stop teaching now. I'm moving on to something else." They look at you like you're crazy. Why would you want to do that? But I think in Ireland, it's a little different because people, do it. And if they realize it's not for them or something different comes along, they're not afraid to make that change.
Yeah, well, it's a very big responsibility, like to be, I wouldn't say in control, but definitely be steering the education of 30 young people. It's a big responsibility, so it's not to be taken lightly. And if it's not for you at a period in your life or whenever, there's no big drama. Just move on. Someone else will come in, young, hungry, and energy. And it's the same principle in coaching. It's the same. It's the same idea. And then even within teaching, there's different areas. You can go into principalship. You can go and work with the department a little bit. So there's a bit of leeway there too for people.
Yeah, of course, of course. Let's start. Let's go back, kind of looking at your early life, Paul, because obviously you're from Dewey in Clare Galway, and yeah. So when you were growing up there, what was it like for you growing up around Dewey?
I would imagine it was pretty ordinary. I was the youngest of three. My dad was a carpenter, and my mum did a bit of work, and she stayed at home. And it was very, very ordinary. Very, very happy. Very, very simple. Our family would have valued hard work. My father would have worked really, really hard, and he would have been a carpenter, and he would have been really into his trade or his craft, and he would have set high standards for himself in that. And I would have probably observed that and noticed that. And I think we just had an ordinary upbringing, same as anyone. And they were happy days, yeah. Then as I got old, I would have been involved in sport. So that would have been a huge part of my life. I had a great passion for my hurling club, and I still do, Cairnmore. So that kind of drew me in up there into hurling especially, and into sport, and into a sense of being something small or something big, and an identity and passion for things. So that kind of drew me in, and I'm still in. And I don't know, is there a way out? So that was about it, and that's been the life. I suppose from when I get passionate or interested in something, I would be pretty detail orientated, and I would be pretty I'd put a lot into it. So that my life has probably become about coaching and teaching and trying to create right words that will help people, inspire them to coach better. And then I am just an ordinary coach myself. I'm still involved with my own club. I'm not really ambitious in coaching. I just see it. I just like doing friendship, and them kind of things would be important to me. So that's why I coach. I coach for my community, and I'm involved with an adult team at the minute as well. And I'm doing that for I would have great time for them people that I'm involved with. So that's really my motivations. And then I stay rambling. And it was on the writing side. I just I started writing a book on my kitchen table, and I'm still sitting at the kitchen table, and I'm still writing books.
And I have to just going back there, because obviously me and Paul met each other a long time ago, because I used to work with Paul's dad, Tony, and because, as he said, Tony was a carpenter, and I started serving my time with Tony, and I worked with him for about 3 years. And for me, it was a great time. I loved your father. He was a great man. And, he was, as you said, he was a very good carpenter, and very, very passionate about his work, and very proud of the work he did, so he was he was one of these men who had a lot to teach. And obviously, as being your father, I'm sure he taught you a lot. And the thing was, he was also, which was I always tell the story of, I don't know if you ever heard the story, Paul. I don't know if you did. It's when the first time I met your dad was, I applied for a job in the Connacht Tribune for a carpenter, and your dad put an advertisement in, and the classified looking for an apprentice carpenter. So at the time I was 15, and he had put in the ad looking for a 16-year-old. So I was thinking, how am I going to get around this? So I wrote a letter to him, and I said, hi Tony, whatever, I'm Simon and I'm 15 and 3/4, and I was trying to emphasize the fact that I was nearly 16, and so I wrote that letter to him, and he came to our house in Corfin to interview me. And it's funny, my parents were sitting in the sitting room, and Tony was there and I was there, and he said to me, that bit in the letter about being 15 and 3/4, it kind of grabbed me, because I thought this fella's really trying to show me that he's not quite there, but he's nearly there. And he said, so it made me interested. And then at that time, I had been studying karate in Tuam, and I didn't know Tony at that stage, And so he said to me, and do you do any sport? And I thought, oh, here's another GA head now, and, someone who only wants you to play Gaelic football. And so I said to him, well, I do karate. And usually if I told people that, around, especially in Corfin being a big GA, pillar, they would say, oh, you don't do Gaelic, you don't do football or hurling or anything. And I'm like, no, I do karate. But I said to Tony, oh, yeah, I do karate. And he went, well, do you? He said, so do I. And I was so shocked. I was like, really? I said, you do karate? And he said, yeah, I teach karate in Currandullah. And I was thinking, and I think that was the moment, once I said that and everything else, it kind of, there was a little bond there then, and I got working with him. And for me, it was a great experience. I loved working, and your dad taught me a lot. And he's gone now, obviously, and you all miss him a lot. But I can see how he was such a great influence on your life too.
Yeah, look at you try not to be too revisionist when you're looking back, because whatever, but you do definitely reflect on how you got to where you got. But yeah, Dad was very much a perfectionist in what he did, and I got some of that. As regards stuff he taught me, he definitely taught me no carpentry, because he taught me how to pass tools to him. I'd say I spent 10 years in apprenticeship finding tools in the van and passing tools to him. I think that was probably one of his limitations there. He never let us make mistakes. He didn't want us making mistakes, so I didn't learn a lot of carpentry. And I did the karate with him as well. He had 4 clubs at one stage. He was a 3rd black belt, I think, and he had 4 clubs, so it was a babysitting service for my mother. We used to go off every night. The karate was something I enjoyed, but it wasn't action enough for me. It moved too slowly. I used to spend a lot of time in the toilets just dossing. And but we had great time with the karate. So, there was great journeys there, bus journeys all over Ireland competing. And looking back, there'd be definitely, even a lot of my friends would have worked with my dad, would have served their time with my dad. And they would probably say we're quite alike. I don't know, can I see that? But it wouldn't be a bad thing to be like him, I don't think,
No. I think, I think, the man that Tony was, even if anybody's a bit like him, that's a great plus. And let's go looking at your dad was from Sligo originally, wasn't he?
Yeah, Dad was my mother and father from Sligo, and they met in London, and they came to Galway, and they had us. Yeah, so Dad would have started working early, went to England, and worked in the buildings in England and that. And I suppose really, Dad then, he got mesothelioma, which is from asbestos, so he picked that up out there, we believe. And he's I would often say his passion or his work was the death of him, and I hope the same isn't true of me in time. So I have to watch that.
There's one thing I have to say about your dad. When I worked with your dad, even though, as you said, he probably had picked that up in London. But I always remember when I would work with your dad, he was always very careful about asbestos and about, even like to do with rats, like, because your dad used to build a lot of kitchens and stuff. And I remember taking out kitchens, and your dad would say, oh, we have to wear gloves now because there could be, a rat piss or whatever under the units. And, so we have to be careful. So he was always very careful about what what he was working around, and he would always say, "Oh, we can't work on that now because asbestos. Somebody else has to come in." But as you said, unfortunately, it probably something like that affected him when he was in his younger days, when there wasn't as many warnings around about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, definitely. When I used to work with him, he was very conscious of dust and stuff like that. And I would imagine that when they were younger in England, I would imagine they were in awful places and they did awful things because they had to, And I'd say that probably taught him a lot about how he had to look after himself and that. But it's definitely, on reflection, he was masks and health and safety orientated hugely. But I'd say when they were young and when they were over there, they were thrown in anywhere. And
that's the thing. So when for you said there you started playing hurling. Were you, while you were still doing the karate, did you start hurling, or did you give up the karate and start hurling, or how did that go?
Yeah, well, we would have always done it kind of conjointly, I suppose. But the karate really, and I tried to go back at it a few times. Concentration would be something I would find sometimes hard. It just wasn't for me. And I've gone back to it since and that, and I wasn't really passionate about it, so I suppose then Dad got bad knees and everything, and eventually he just packed it in, so that was a natural end to it. So then I was playing hurling and football all the time, and just once he was out of it, I was out of it. It was, it wasn't no big loss to me, but there was definitely great. I remember at the time in Galway in the 90s, there was just a great energy about the competition of karate. It was big back then, and the Dubs used to come down a lot. You'd have the All Irelands and you'd have the different Connacht Opens, and the Dubs,
George Riley and all those.
Yeah. So the Dubs used to come down, and it was quite fearsome. It was quite. I'd say if it was nowadays, it'd be really blown up to be. It would be glamorized, but there was a big, there was a tribalism to it, and there was a lot of good guys around Galway: Jerry McSweeney, Frank McDermott, Moyle and Johnny Moyle, and all them boys. They went on, they represented Ireland, and they fought in Europe, and there was an energy to it. And obviously, when your dad was involved, my dad was involved there. He'd be fighting or he'd be refereeing, so it was kind of cool enough. But I think they were very enjoyable days for sure.
Yeah, because like last week I had Dave Joyce from Dave Joyce Martial Arts and Galway on, and we were talking about those good old days in Galway with the big lot of the clubs and everything. But I remember that vividly. My instructor in tune was Celia Kelly, and I remember between going to the gradings or going to the freestyle sparring competitions or kata competitions, there was a sense of kind of community and that tribalism, as you said, because. And when you were young, looking up to Jerry McSweeney and Frank McDermott and all of those, and it was great. I mean, and there was a sense of rivalry, but everybody was together in it too. And George Riley would come down.
Yeah, I think when the Dubs used to come down to fight, like I think there was there was a bit of glamour to that, and I suppose we were west of Ireland, so it was great to see our lads being able to beat them. Like there was a shine off them boys coming down.
Yes,
and I think some of them went on to different things. I seen Paul Byrne went on to be kind of remember him, Paul Byrne. He went on to be kind of a celebrity fitness trainer, Body Byrne, I think he is now. But I can remember him. They would shine off them boys coming down. And then our lads would give it to them. So there was
also the lads from Cork as well, because you had Ray Payne and a few of those from Cork. And I remember, and when Kanazawa used to come to Cork, there was always this big thing of the Galway and the West going with the Dublin lads to Cork, so it was always very competitive too.
Yeah, I think so. I think from our side it was probably because the Galway boys were good at the time. Like Jerry McSweeney was really, really good, and sure, it's like everything. If you know him, you think this is great. Like so, they were. Yeah, so there was definitely the Cork boys, Toomey and all them boys. So because Dad was involved in that, and I think he would be either refereeing or he'd be fighting or he was in the IFKU or whatever it was called at that time. So even Riley, like he used to organise all that stuff, and so that was definitely. Even though I wasn't into I definitely wasn't into kata. I didn't mind the fighting, but I just the detail of the kata really bored me. But I liked the energy and the. I remember it used to be around Lent time all the time when competitions to be on, and I'd always be off the sweets for lunch, and I'd always break them at the time of the competitions because they'd be there and there'd be a shop. But Jesus, I haven't
there'll be
thought
always
about
a stall.
yeah, and you'd blow your head off with sweets. But Paul Hardyman now, who owns Shomer Yoga in Galway, he was Nicky Hardyman's son.
I remember, Nicky, Paul, and there was Paul, Nicky was the father, and Paul, and what was the other brother?
Andy,
Andy, that's
so
it.
Paul
Andy.
now owns Shomer Yoga inside in Galway City. So I'd still be friendly, or I'd bump into him, and so all them, it was a special time as far as I could see back then. I was only young, but it was definitely it was a bit of,
I remember Nicky Hardyman was a great character. Everyone knew him.
Yeah, I would have very vague memories of Nicky. I can visualize him, and I can remember being at his house one day, and I remember ultimately when he died. Then, but they were great old days. Yeah, and I think like that. Obviously, they talk now about physical literacy and fundamental movement skills and all that. Like, and even now as regards in education, like they definitely see in an awful lot of the reports, educational psychologist reports trying to do a martial art. And I think everyone, there's this, it's now recognised as a great way for athletic development and probably mental skills development for young people. So I definitely know. I won't say I was really flexible, so I never got injured until I started getting injured ultimately, and then when I started getting injured, it wasn't great, but it definitely gave me a good physical base. I was quite okay at it, but I probably didn't apply myself as well as I could have had, and I think the fact that my father was probably teaching me didn't probably help,
Yeah, well, as kids of coaches themselves sometimes tend to run in the opposite direction, because it can sometimes be the father or mother pushes a little too much, and the child maybe they're too involved, so they kind of do it, and they want to do it a little bit, but it's tough. It's hard being the son or daughter of a coach, in no matter what sport you're doing, because they are so passionate. Sometimes then when you go home from the event or from the activity, it's still going on and there's still talk about it and everything, so you never get away from it.
I've never really thought of it at all, only now I was just thinking I've never thought of this, but I don't think my dad was pushing me or had any great ambitions for me in it, but I think he used to know I had talent at it, but I wasn't too bothered by it. It just wasn't my passion, and I suppose that's a lesson I would have learned, in everything you're doing. If it's not your passion, it can be, obviously there is that coach's element, that, and I'm a big believer that a coach needs to be able to articulate the game and connect the player or the athlete to the game, and that's a really important to show the nuance of the sport and the beauty of the sport, and that's a really important part of coaching. Now, I'm not saying my father could or couldn't do that, but I don't think he could do it for me anyways. But I think, and obviously, he was a coach, but he wasn't a coach. They didn't know what coaching was, back then. It was a trainer or instructor or whatever. It's jog down memory lane.
Yeah, because it's interesting you say that, actually, because a lot of practitioners of karate and martial arts and things like that, they would do their gradings, they would get up to the brown belt and the black belt, whatever, but then they might start taking classes in the club, and that was their level of coaching. They were passing on techniques they had learned, but they didn't get into the scientific side of it, and they didn't know all the fundamental core principles of a lot of coaches would know now. So you could get somebody who was coaching a karate club for years, but maybe if you ask them to coach another thing, they mightn't know how to approach it.
Yeah, well, I suppose technical proficiency usually leads to people being sent up the line to manage or to coach, and it's the same in industry, it's the same in education, it's the same in GA, in anything, and they're two different disciplines. Without a doubt, having a technical knowledge is an advantage, but if you can't communicate it, articulate it, if you can't design sessions that help the learner lead to learning. And if you don't understand teaching and learning, so there's learning, but there's also teaching. So if the learner isn't learning the way we're teaching, well, I think Wooden used to say, you haven't taught until they've learned. So I'd often hear coaches that maybe wouldn't be far advanced in their coaching journey would say, we've done this and they don't know it. But they're confusing, they're just abdicating responsibility on the teaching side. Our job as coaches is to teach until they have learned and to find a way. And I think teaching is, I heard a phrase recently, it's interrupting the forgetting process. So we're always looking to create ways we can articulate it and deliver in such a way the core principles, the key skills, in such a way that they get it, because repetition is so important in this stuff. And I think it's coaching is a profession, and it's a largely everyone thinks that you can just do it. And I wouldn't be overcritical of coaches or the Joe Average or whoever's coming, because it's a different discipline. It's a completely different discipline, and most people that are involved in coaching, even at professional level, definitely at amateur level, anyways, they just don't know what they don't know. They don't know a thing called coaching really exists and what it is. They would have been experiential learners, which they would have been trained, I suppose, would be the old methodology. So you can't be too harsh on something. I always say you don't test someone until you teach them something, and a lot of people that are involved in coaching and whatever haven't been taught a better way.
How did you get into coaching? Like, obviously you were hurling and you stopped doing the karate and stuff, but was it through hurling that you started like junior coaching, or how did you actually start?
Yeah. I was. I started very young. I probably started around 16 or 17. John Carr was a man from Carnmore, and I think he seen me training one day. He tells me back anyways, and he said, I would have been quite, when I was training, I was into it. I was pushing on our lads. I would be, we hadn't a bad team. So he said he seen me and he saw something in me. So he asked me to come and help, and I went down and helped. And at the time, Carnmore and Thurlockmore used to come together to beat Claregalway in the community games, and that was in Mosney at the time, and it was it was enjoyable. But for the first 3 years of my coaching, I often say that team, I had them the different team 3 years in a row, and they actually got to the Mosney 3 years in a row, and they won it twice. They lost the final, I think, the third time. I can't even remember. But as someone who was 17 or 18, coaching them, and I use the term loosely, sure, obviously this was the greatest thing ever for my ego. So I was absolutely, saying this is for me. I am brilliant at this, and I've spent the rest of my life realizing that I'm not that good at it. Look at, that maybe then, like at the time then I would have stayed with the underage in the club, and I wouldn't have had a clue really what I was at. It would be go faster, listen to me more, and do it better. And if you didn't do it better, well, you didn't listen to me more, and you weren't concentrating, and you're not trying hard enough. So it's very unnuanced, very just listen to me, mug to jug type trainer, And but I would have been trying to innovate and try to find better ways. And I suppose then I would have started connecting teaching practices. So in school I would have had my own way of doing things. We would have had a very relaxed atmosphere in the class. We would we would have had a lot of fun, a lot of enjoyment, a lot of music, a lot of general.
You did your second level in Carnmore.
No, my second level school, is it? No, I'm talking about teaching. Yeah, no, so when I was teaching in Bushy Park, I've taught there for 15 years.
Sorry,
so when I was 18, 19, then I stayed coaching, and then I started teaching. And that brought me to 23, 22, 23. And, I suppose I started learning more about teaching and started connecting it to coaching, and maybe became a bit better at it. And then I suppose just got so interested in it, and I would have always been one to kind of get into things before they become popular. Like I often say, I think I was the first man to wear a pair of red chinos in Galway ever. But no, that's no claim to fame. But yeah,
I'm not sure. It could be, but it mightn't be.
And then when everyone started wearing them, I'd stop wearing them. So before everyone was cycling around on bikes, I had been to France and I'd cycled in the Alps, and I got into all that before people were doing this adventure race, and I did one of the first. What did they call it at the time? So I get into stuff. So I got into coaching early. I don't know how I would always find myself. People around me wouldn't be interested in this stuff, but I'd be interested in it. And got a passion for coaching, and then learnt, and then I would have, probably been a bad student because I always thought I knew more than the teacher, in coaching parlance, you know what I mean? I would always say, oh, geez, we can do this better. We can, you know what I mean? And I probably then eventually said, well, I got injured a bit, and then I eventually said, look, I'll just take on the adult team here, and I will prove my own concepts, or not. So I got involved with the senior team in my club at 26. So I kind of gave up sport playing myself at that age. Or I never really got into it because I was so looking at coaching that I'd play a bit, and I never really gave my all. Once it came to adult level, I was just dual focused, and it doesn't really work. So I was coaching all the time and trying to play, and it didn't really work. So anyways, I went coaching the adult senior team, and I put everything into that. And at the time, I wouldn't have been aware of the sports science or the research around coaching, or even that there was a kind of a place there like UL or places that were teaching about coaching in sport, or that there would have been things like analysis in sport, or that there would have been, things like key performance indicators or stuff. I kind of came up with that stuff myself. We'll have to measure this. We'll have to figure it out. We'll have to understand what's important in the game. Because back then, and it's not that long ago, maybe it's only 12 years ago, there wasn't that research. Like since then, Damien Young has researched these 10 or 12 published papers on the demands of hurling. We see the Sunday game isn't anymore just about, who the points going over the bar. To a certain degree now, sometimes they're not as detailed as it could be, but to a certain degree there's analysis and the systems, and so all that stuff I got interested in, and and then after that I spent 3 years there with our senior team, and that was a great education because they were largely my friends who coached, and the team was getting older, and we really put everything in, so I would have learned a lot from that, but it came at a huge cost. The price of that for me was heavy, because it was everything. I always used to say whatever it takes was the phrase. So then when I went finished that, I still we probably brought a team as far as it could go. I think we got to a quarter final for the first time in years, and we were probably 3 or 4 minutes away from winning it, and we didn't ultimately. Were beaten, but we brought the team as far as we could, and a lot of lads probably stayed playing because we gave it one last push, and the team was old. And then I kind of said to myself, I could see down the line that the work hadn't been put in the underage, and that the new player coming wasn't as good as what was leaving, and I could see that we were in for a lean period. That was probably about.
Can I ask you that there? That's a really interesting point, because when you look there at, for example, Corofin football, and a lot of people put down the success to the underage teams and the work being put in the same way like the Man United youth academies and so on, and the youth academies in soccer in the UK. Do you feel that a lot of clubs fall by the wayside after a certain amount of years because the development is not put into the youth?
So, and this is the area I now work in. I suppose I'm nearly making a profession out of it now at this stage. Hopefully soon, full time. But because we're probably underestimating it. So before we thought, well, anyone can do, your man played football or he played whatever, and now sure, we'll give him them young lads, and that's fine, and he'll be fine. So we now have a different generation. So obey and command is no longer a form of leadership. So that's gone. If we go back to Catholic Ireland, where you do what you were told, that is now gone because there's access to more information and there's less fear and less everything. So the same is probably true of of the young sports person. So it's like evolve or die. So the best clubs have understood teaching and learning and player development. And the game now is, no matter what anyone tells you, the players are now infinitely more skilled, better athletically developed, better tactically aware, you name it. So now we understand that the scope for development is massive underage. If we give them the appropriate challenge at the right age, and put in the correct behaviours, develop the correct mental skills, physical qualities, technical skills, all that stuff, the game, like, the best is yet to come. So a lot of clubs now are tapping into this, and Daddy Coach now probably played at the end of the old style where it was coming in, tactics and everything was coming in, and then they might have been third level education, or they might be working in multinational where they see, R&D, research and development, and they see change acceleration stuff, and they understand the principles of getting better, or whatever you want to call it. So now they're bringing that down and they're applying it to coaching structures, and they understand it's about development and surrounding the player in the correct environment, and giving them the right challenge. So we give them the right tools and the right challenge, like the baby eating the dinner. We don't just land down the big plate. We give them the right things and the right little tools, and we teach them the right skills, and eventually they can eat the dinner. So the challenge for clubs is bigger and bigger and bigger all the time, because the learner is changing so much. They are now probably not outside as much, so they're not developing the physical qualities as much. There's huge challenges. So the clubs now that tap into this and understand that, I suppose, coach development is now the best form of player development. In the past, a lot of players would have developed despite of everything. It would have been just a blind passion and a crazy passion. But now that will no longer be enough, because the players that have been coached and developed very well, they're now learning the mental skills, how to your arousal zones, how to control your arousal zones, attentional focus skills. They're now being physically developed from 12, 13, 14 at the right age, by a lot of the time by good professional people. So the training sessions now, we understand skill acquisition at a higher level and all that. So the teams that are going to survive and thrive are the teams that get their coaching structures right. Now, tradition always helps. So there's a tradition in certain places where your father played and you played and everything, and that is great. But so the ultimate probably happened in CARVER, where you had tradition, and then you had expertise. You had Frank Morris, who dedicated his life to it. And then I think you probably had a certain group of guys who came together at a time to bring it to the next level then. So I don't think they like being mentioned, but like the likes of Dave Morris, Frank's dad, came with a certain skill set at a certain time. He understood analysis, he understood tactics, and he understood coaching. And then Dave Hanley was a physio, and he's with Connacht Rugby now, and he was with, they're the same age. He came with a skill set so that they could prepare. Probably Mike Comer got into the S&C, and he came with a skill set so they could prepare physically, technically. So they had the block of the player development at the bottom, and Frank, giving his life there, and then they had and then they had tradition, and then they had expertise at the top. And it's very there's a lot of details in it, and people will probably dumb it down, but there's an awful lot of people. And then they would have got in outside people like Rochford, when they said to get to the next level we need more expertise. So the levels, it's like, what is success? Like, a team can go in the morning and have the best players and win, we'll say, a county final, if you want to call it that. And you can live the rest of your life off that, and say, but that could be, that's winning, or, that mightn't be success. Like, success might be, for that team, might be going on and winning 3 or 4, and that's real success. So I think what CARVER have done is real success, genuine success, best principles, best practice over time. It's very, very rare because it's dependent on so much acumen, expertise and leadership, good coaching, and tradition is brilliant too. It's all there. So that's...
Do you think as well, though, because obviously, like you mentioned there, Mike Comer, Dave Hanley, all those guys, so for them, they learned to be more technical with their own training and for themselves as they were, coming through the ranks. And then obviously they learned to become coaches in that sense as well, because they could pass it on.
I think that, they played and then they had a skill set. So Dave was a physio. So he was exposed to what was happening in professional sport, and then they started probably, and look at, I know them pretty okay, but I'm only guessing because I wasn't there. But they started taking recovery better, right? In rehabilitation better. Mike Comer, he's S&C, so rather than flogging lads and killing them and getting them injured, 95% fit is a lot better than 100% injured. So understanding that. So it's that expertise, like that's a lot of people, and we even see it now in GAA now. The leading team in hurling at the minute is Limerick, and there's a significant amount of expertise. Their coach has just finished a 5-year research PhD in games-based approach to coaching. So there's an expertise, there's an expertise there where we're taking influence from other sports and we're funneling it down and we're understanding the demands of our game and then how we can design sessions and articulate key coaching points and cues. Whereas in another management setup, they might know what they don't know. They might say, well, whoever won 10 years ago, this is what he did, and that's it. Whereas the newer, people that have more time, number one, they probably aren't, I'm not saying they're not working a day job, but their day job might lend itself more to time to research it. And they're accumulating acumen, and they're learning. And it's a learning competition. I always say sport and coaching and everything is a learning competition. And it comes at a price. Coaching for a lot of the people at the higher end or any end, that want to, thrive in it. It comes at a huge price, the cost of learning. And that's time. And that's probably not going here, there and everywhere at weekends. And, it's getting up early, it's reading, it's researching, and it's a lonely place,
Do you think what has been the leading sport over the last 10 years in terms of research and development and into training methods? Do you think football, like soccer, would be a big one, or do you think like cycling or one of these?
To be honest, I'd be only guessing. I don't think I'm qualified to answer that. I think there's been innovation in a lot of sports. So there's been huge innovation in Gaelic football, and on that path, we'll say, if we go back and watch a game from 20 years ago, they kicked the ball up the pitch and then they kicked the ball down the pitch, yeah, and then whoever was bigger, faster, and stronger won it, yeah, and the best players won. So if I kick a ball to a guy who's bigger, faster, and stronger and put it between two lads, and one of them is bigger, faster, and stronger, he's going to win the ball. So and then the best players win. But if then coaches come and look at this and how can we devise a better system for us to win? So I suppose one of the first guys to do that was probably McGuinness. And he devised a system that suited his team to win. And ultimately they won. So in his evolution, and again, I wasn't there, I'm just looking at this. I wouldn't even, I might be wrong with what I'm saying here. But then when he had that, we'll say, that defensive solidity, then he wanted to add another layer to it and another layer to it. And he understood the key skills that were needed for that system. He understood the principles of that system and the system ultimately. And then he understood, the weak points of the system and how they'd have to evolve. And he understood it in great detail. And he's a qualified sports psychologist. And he had been here, there, and everywhere. And then you get whoever, Paul Kilgannon or anybody, who comes and say, we're going to do exactly what they did. And you don't know the nuances of the key skills and how to coach them, how to teach them. You don't know the principles of the language. You don't know how they wanted to evolve that, because they had evolved significantly by the time he had left it. And then you try that. You know, I've heard it before. I've heard it saying, oh, we're using the same style whoever used. And I'm there, man, like you have no idea the level of detail they put into getting that off the ground.
Well, I think what it is, you know, if you look at any sport, when there's a successful manager and he has, you know, new and sometimes people might say weird training techniques or weird philosophies around his training methods, like look at Jose Mourinho, for example, in England, you know, and when he was in other countries had great success. But then people were like, well, is it down to man management? Is it down to his training methods? But it's all of those things, but it's the mind of the coach as well. So I think when it comes to Jim McGuinness, I think for him, like you said, being a sports psychologist and then delving into all of this scientific approach towards training, you know, about how can we devise methods that will work for our team. I think it's very hard for another coach to recreate that because maybe they don't have the intellectual background or they don't have the physical background that puts it all together. So I think he was very unique, Jim McGuinness, wasn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And he was an innovator and he reimagined how it went. And people loosely say that he ruined the game and he's to blame for defensive football. And like he did his thing, and people who knew less than him copied him, and therein lies the problem. You know what I mean? And so, you know, and again, a lot of the pundits that end up with the voice in this aren't really coaches either. You know what I mean? They're pundits who played a game a long time ago. And so their articulation or their explanation of what's happening mightn't be that expertise either. You know, again, I often say we are a small nation island playing an amateur game. So it doesn't really take a huge leap of understanding to suggest maybe there's better ways in the world. You know, maybe there's some people in professional sports who work at it full time, you know, that have little bits of better ideas than whoever who's a great coach, you know. So our understanding of it is limited. But that's changing now because look at it, every second lad I hear now is doing a PhD in this and everything else. But to come full circle, coaching is ultimately a very simple practice, yeah? But you can't confuse simple and easy. So the most, you know, was it Einstein that said simplicity is the highest form of complexity. So we're not ultimately trying to make this more complex. We are trying to make it more simple through knowing what is important. And it's to get to know what's important and what detail is what's important and how we can drive application, intention and concentration towards them little details. Because they would say little leopards become big leopards and big leopards kill. So it is the crinus, it is the attention to detail in these things that if the coach is able to drive that detail, ultimately every coach keeps saying the same thing, try harder, you know what I mean? Or even sometimes we come back to this ill-defined concept of hard work. You know, hard work is, as I often say, because I've heard Eamon O'Shea talk about it and I thought he articulated really well. He said hard work has been able to put the ball into someone's hands from 30 metres away while they run at speed. That is hard work. And that saves an awful lot of running around the place like an idiot. So efficiency and understanding that, you know, the coach, this thing keeps coming up on my screen, I don't know what it is, but the coach that understands that and drills down to it and will say, that's been my experience of it. The expert knows what's not important. And to get to a place where we know what's not important is really tough.
And for you, so, you know, I want to talk about your books in a minute, but before we do, when was the moment, you know, that you started developing your own, you know, philosophy and methods around coaching? Like, is it something that you said, I'm going to sit down and reevaluate all of this and look at where I feel I'm going wrong with this or what I don't know? Or did you kind of have these things you were putting away in scrapbooks and diaries and building it up over years? How did it develop?
Yeah, you know, I've often heard people saying I'm writing a book, and I've learned from experience, you're not writing a book until it's written. So I would have... however way I found myself into writing down things and journaling and thinking about things, and and in a very inefficient manner, because I didn't know this stuff existed out in the world. I was just making it up myself. Like, how would we measure our performance? I didn't know those stuff. So I started at that, and that, I would have always written down stuff and figured it out and all that. And then ultimately, one day I just said, I think someone said, you want to stop reading books and write your own book. And I said, I'll start writing my own book. So I started writing a book about coaching. And actually, it was going to be about the power and potential and scope of coaching to improve society as a whole. How the whole thing was going to be about how sport should be the centre of society, and how we can solve obesity, mental health and everything through proper coaching in sport. That was my thing. But again, it wasn't, when I started on that, the feedback was not practical. It's almost like a manifesto. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You were being too much of a dictator.
I was just saying, imagine if every club in the country had a place for everyone to come down and play with their friends in a good environment, where we could challenge them appropriately, teach them the proper skills, and teach them love and respect of the game and themselves and each other. So then when I got that idea, then I said, Jesus, I have to write, well, how are you going to do this? So then I started writing. And then I had a story in my head around Michelangelo. He said about the angel David. I saw the angel in the stone and I carved him till I set him free. So that said to me, oh, Jesus, coaching is a bit like carving, or being a carver, where you draw out a masterpiece out of raw materials. So in order to do that, and I must have told this story a million times, and sorry for anyone who's listening that's heard me on about this before.
No, well, you're probably going to have to tell a million more.
Well, I think I will. Hopefully, I hope I'll have to. But so in order to draw that masterpiece out of the raw materials, you need a perspective or a set of lenses to see things for what they could be if you had the skills and tools to help realize it. And then you need tools, so the right tools for the job. And then, you need your tools and skills. So you need perspective, tools and skills. And then I said, right, CARVER, right, so which is CARVER, CARVER. So that was going to be my CARVER framework. And within that CARVER framework, there was going to be 6 elements that had to spell CARVER. All right. So they ended up being, it was connection, awareness, research, values and visions, endorsing and reflection. Now, I can remember saying to my dad at the time, would I call it CARVER or CARVER? Or I had 2 other elements, I can't even remember. But I settled on them 6 elements. So I was going to have a CARVER framework for building a coaching world, and it was going to have 6 elements. Connection, awareness, research, values and visions, and endorsing. So within that, then I had to write a book or a framework which followed them elements to make something that was compact, that would explain coaching in a simple way about getting the best out of people. And so from that, then we had the connection started. So there was about 8 elements in connection. So it was coach to child or coach to player. That was the first connection. Then we had player to player was the second connection. Player to the game, to the club, and to their future in the club was the third connection. Coach to coach, so we could work in a coordinated manner. And then we had a few more little connections, but it was team back to parent and coaching team to parent. And then the A was awareness. Again, if you've heard this all before, I'm really, really sorry. Awareness we had awareness, so the coach awareness and the player awareness. So the coach awareness was self-awareness. Why did you coach? How did you want to perform? Blah, blah, blah. There was also an element of role awareness. What is coaching? Do you understand what it is? So they were 2, they were 2 awarenesses. And then the player awareness. We wanted to bring a player who was self-aware, who understood if it is to be, it is up to me. So how can we draw out self-awareness in a player? And that was lots of questions and listening to their answers. And then we wanted to have in-game awareness, which was ultimately decision-making. And in order to have that, we needed to have of-game awareness, which was understanding the principles of play, the systems and the structures. So we needed them 3 awarenesses: self-awareness, in-game awareness and off-game awareness. So in order to do that, we needed to research, which was the R, which was to find out about how we could build the pillars of the player, mental skills, physical skills, technical skills, tactical skills and lifestyle skills, and what we needed there. And then the V was values. So what were the values that you would want to stand over as a coach? And then the visions were what you were trying to create. So what type of coach did you want to be? What type of player did you want to produce? What type of team did you want to produce? How did you think a session should look? So ultimately everything then, there was a few more visions there, but we won't sweat them. But everything to that point then led you to being able to design a vision for a session. Well, so I knew my research, I knew what I was about, I knew why I was there, I knew what I was trying to achieve, and now I needed to create a session. And I had research around whatever. So we created a session, a vision for the session, as I had to call it. I had to brand everything in the element. And then E was going to be endorsing, which meant, can we use language intelligently to notice things that are happening around us? And because of that, we would be positive, but it wouldn't be, oh, awesome play or this rubbish, amazing goal. It would be, I love the way you moved your feet. Okay, good body shape there. Excellent, you bounced off the ground when you were hit. Well done. Good recovery. So endorsing was like you were trying to, the idea was behind the reticular activating system in the brain, which meant, you were conditioned to see what you looked for or what was important to you. So that was endorsing. So especially with kids. Now we will I'm looking at the All Blacks there and different things. We would see modern, at elite level coaching, it can't be all. It has to be direct. But at developmental coaching, it needs to be more staged and more patient and more understanding. So the endorsing was a way of looking at it, saying, what can I see is what is right with what they're doing? And then trying to drive the confidence, which would ultimately drive the competence and contribution and all these things that we understood. So then came the reflection. So after each session, the coach would have to reflect, the team would reflect, and then the management team would reflect. And reflection, I was only reminded of this statement I made there one day about reflection because I was in a meeting there last night and they reminded me. But reflection is like washing. So it really works really well, but you kind of have to do it. If not every day, you have to do it every second or third day, or else you start to smell. So the reflective piece was the continuous improvement. So you had built your world, and then you had planned your sessions and all that stuff, and then you'd done them, and then a little bit of reflection. And could you have a reflection tool that was connected to what you had built? So the phrase I was using was building a coaching world through the CARVER framework, and I wrote a book on that damn near killed me because I created such it was a simple concept, but then I had to write a coaching book into this concept. And that book now is Touchwood will be written is being written at the minute, where I'm at it, with the help of another guy as a corporate coaching book. So the CARVER corporate framework for coaching. It's the same principles. The principles are the principles of the principles. So methods are a little, change in that, but principles are, they say methods are few, but methods are many, but principles are few. So the same principles apply to whether I'm in a school environment, whether I'm a carpenter teaching an apprentice, the same principles of coaching. So coaching is a universal practice across all disciplines, and so that was the CARVER framework.
When you did your first book, Coaching Children in Sport, had you already developed that, or was that in the process as you were writing that book?
Well, it was more. The title was Coaching Children in Sport, the CARVER framework. So that was how I had done it. That was really how I had been my life trying to figure this out. So that was, and again, there's nothing unique in it. It's only my perspective that's unique on it. Like there was times where I thought I was, I didn't even know this world existed. I was making it up. So it's things that intuitively through self-study and through all them principles of what is in the framework. That's how it came about. And so that book then, like I was writing a book for a coach at the time. I knew it was a book about coaching, but I had to write a book about coaching children because I was a teacher, and who was going to listen to me about coaching in general? So that's why I wrote Coaching Children in Sport, the CARVER framework. I probably should have wrote just the CARVER coaching framework and said this is the principles of coaching. But no one had read it, so I just wrote about coaching kids.
Can I ask you there though, because you said there that's something you said, who was going to listen to me? Did you feel at that time when you were writing the first book that you were really trying to write the second book, but you didn't have the confidence, so you had to start from where you knew, which was coaching kids?
No. Yeah, well, the second book is different. The second book is for the athlete themselves. So the second book is called Be the Best You Can Be in Sport, a book for Irish youth. So that was a different book. It's for the athlete, which that book has gone really, really well too and been well received. So I had nothing in my head. Again, I go back to people saying, "Oh, I'm writing a book or anything." You're not really writing a book until it's written. It only becomes a book when it's finished. So I didn't know anything. I didn't know I was writing. I told people I was writing a book, but I didn't know I had a book. And then, I suppose it's a bit like I listened in preparation for this podcast. I listened to your one with Leo Moore. It's probably a little bit like writing a song or something. It's kind of in you, and it just comes out, and you're not so sure. And then ultimately, maybe writing a song could be a little bit easier than writing 400 pages of a book. But well, I'm not saying it's easier, but simpler. I don't know. But it's just the doggedness to stay at it, to see it through. So the devil is in the detail, and the nearer you are, the farther you are away from it.
But also, the thing is, for sportsmen or musicians or actors, there are certain times during your journey and your career where you have a lot of self-doubt, and you have a lot of doubts about, am I doing this the right way? Will anyone want to read this? Will it be taken the right way? Will I have a lot of critics? Did you have that when you were doing the first book? Because you said it was a lot of self-study.
Yeah, but again, I can only talk for myself and people that I understand. I think there's a lot of self-doubt in anyone who's on the limit or who's out there. There has to be. That's what drives innovation. If you're so sure of what you're at, you're never going to innovate. So it's all about innovation, and it's always changing. So the best is yet to come. So there's always going to be self-doubt. And I think that's a driver. I don't think there's anything ever wrong with that element of it. I don't see, I'm pretty sure whoever, when they're bringing out an album, isn't going to go, yeah, I can guarantee this is going to sell.
Yeah, of course.
But ultimately, if you bring out one album and it sells and people like it, well, then your second album, you're going to say, well, Jesus, this might sell too. So, and that, if it's called a confidence in what you do or whatever, it probably comes, in my experience, later than what people would see it in you. And I think it's interesting because people can say, oh, you could do this, or you could go anywhere, or you could, do whatever. But ultimately, until you believe that yourself, it's not going to happen. And it's not flicking a switch. A certain amount of it just comes with time. I now feel it's right. I feel I can stand over this, and that's earned. You know what I mean? That's earned. It's like the athlete training. That accumulation of training gives them that sense. Like, I can meet a kid out the road there today, and I can say, "Geez, I think you have it, buddy." And that will inspire him a little bit. But ultimately, until he knows it, he can feel it, and people can probably see it in him a bit before. But that's my experience of the writing. It's about overcoming the fear, but the fear is ultimately what drives the attention to detail and the going back and the figuring out. Part of excellence is knowing you're not. Someone quoted me there on this the last day, so I remember it. I've written in the book there. I think part of excellence is knowing you're not good enough to stay the same. So that's that fear of, getting better, always getting better. It's a mindset, it's a mentality, and then there's ultimately a bit of pride in your work. It's easy to bring a book to 80% in my experience. It's easy, but it's like the 80-20. You'll get it to 80% with 20% of the effort, but to get it finished at the end and tightened and be able to stand over every word and rip them out and go through it. I rewrote the first book 30 times. You know what I mean? The human price of that was, I'm still scared. I still get a headache thinking about it. And that's, that's the price of it. So, and an awful lot of, even the second book, I've interviewed 54 people across 15 sports to get little snippets on the different topics. So both I and different professionals in different areas have written the chapters, and then there's amendments from coaches and players. And the thing, and I try to go after the athletes who had been through it all and had stayed at the top for a long time, so just hadn't traded on ability. It's very easy. I'm not saying it's not very easy. None of this is easy. But you can come and win something and disappear, But sustained excellence is something completely different. I think Leo talked about, staying in it so long. It's a completely different game. It's not an ability. Obviously, the ability gets it there, but there's a whole different set of qualities required to sustain excellence.
And Paul, can I ask you, nowadays, obviously, with so much emphasis being placed on, mental health, spirituality, and, developing the inner self, and people being not afraid to show their weaknesses, and for people to help them overcome those. How do you think that's changed the philosophy in sport? Because for lots of sports, whether it be combat sports or, the Gaelic or anything, there was an awful lot of, macho and image, and you really had to be a tough guy all the time. So how do you feel it is now for younger guys and kids and boys and girls with softer kind of personalities in sport nowadays? Do you feel that the sport is changing a lot to welcome them in and to nurture the weaknesses?
Underage sport is, yeah, like child sport, underage sport definitely is. And to be fair to the GA, they've done a good job in decompetitising or making it uncompetitive young. And there was a lot of, a lot of uneducated discourse around that at the time, oh, they needed this or they needed that, and if we weren't beating the locals at underage, yeah, if we weren't beating the locals at underage, it was going to be, a disaster, and there had to be competition. Now, there's a certain amount of truth in that, because we do need stretch and support, and they need to be challenged, but it's understanding this age and stage of the learner, and like sport. Coaches are so important in sport because it can be so challenging. Like, that's why you will see, a coach goes into a place and changes the whole place. Guardiola goes in and he changes the whole place, or Klopp, because you're constantly trying to do something that is really superhuman. In Premier League, they're playing every 3 or 4 days. It's a superhuman thing. So they need so many good professionals around them. Even Joe Canny with Corofin there, he'd be a buddy of mine, and he was involved in coaching them, and they're 3 in a row. And I said, Joe, do you not realise what you're trying to do is almost superhuman? So the support that's needed around that, and that's why the coaching is coming. And even like I would have listened to Johnny Wilkinson there recently, and he went to the extremes to achieve greatness, and he did, but he probably didn't enjoy it. And he wrote a book then that a lot of people would have taken as a Bible, but now he kind of distanced himself. And maybe I don't want to misquote him, but I believe that he distanced himself from a whole lot of what's in it, because he says that was like crazy what I was at, and I was it was on bordering psychosis, and that's why the coach is now so important, because to achieve excellence there has to be, there's a bit of an extreme there. So that's why they need the pillars around them of people who can understand and help them understand, and mental skills, sports psychologists, all them people. That's why you get all these big backroom teams in high performing, even amateur sports now, because you need so many people to support the athlete, because what they're trying to do is a little bit superhuman. Go to work from 9 to 5 and then be almost like a professional athlete for the evening, and do that for 5 or 6 days for 48 weeks of the year, and get through college and get a profession. So people that don't, I'm not saying I don't claim to understand all of this or any of this or half of it, but people that don't understand it, don't appreciate it at the level it's at, they do it a disservice. And it's not to say you need all these people. It's to say you need all them good people. If you have good people, I always say sport is about good people trying their best. Good people trying their best.
Yeah, I think though, we're moving into we're moving into a different era, in not just in sport, but in work psychology and everything, because we have to look now. It's not that people are becoming softer, but people are becoming more exposed and more open to what ails them. And so for at the moment, obviously, mental health is a big issue because of COVID and people kind of feeling trapped in their own homes. And for a lot of sports stars who maybe can't play as much sport as they would like, now their mental health is being challenged in another way. But what I always kind of think is, when you look at sports stars from an early age, sometimes they have a lot of pressure. And, we've all heard of the underage clubs who have the guy on the sideline shouting more curses than the devil, and people, like, there was some incidences in around Galway there where some clubs faced criticism because of things that were being said to kids that we felt, oh no, that shouldn't be said to children. So when we look back in the early days, a lot of GAA and other sports used to be very hard on the kids to achieve results. So that, like for me, in my opinion, you have to nurture things, and that's what's better about sport now. They're not being so critical and not kind of saying you're not making the team, Johnny, you're off the team. So nowadays, I feel there's far more nurturing going on in these good clubs. No.
Yeah, yes, but again, I'll be a defender of coaches. You know, the people that we're talking about, they didn't know any better. They didn't know any other way. They got no training. They got no education. They got no support, and they they had a passion that they didn't know how to articulate, and they didn't know how to challenge and assist appropriately. And it's very easy to say how the doer of deeds could have done things better, but the challenge of coaching young children appropriately is really, really hard. And we historically we have attached a certain level of kind of and it's good, tribalism or identity or whatever in sport, and shame, like Jesus, we'd be ashamed if we lost here. And then that coaching behaviors are driven from them beliefs. So in my work, what I try to do is create an environment where it's easier to develop as a coach. So we talk about the club a lot of the time, and who is the club? We are all the club, but it's club's responsibility, if they can, and it's a challenge because a lot of this is done through volunteers, to provide an environment and guidance for the coach where they can get better at coaching. So if you're in a club where it's all about just winning, well, your behaviours are going to be, geez, we have to do whatever we want to win. But if you're in a club that has an extra layer of knowing, right? So the big picture is that we produce lots of players long term who will support it. Now, how will we do this, right? And it's not to say that we can't challenge or be direct, because the better the coach player relationship, the more direct they can be. Like, it doesn't have to be, oh, you're a great boy and you're all that. There's a kind of there's a confusingness there that a coach shouldn't demand. It's not a confusing, but it's kind of a grayness. The coach needs to be demanding. We need to be stretched, right? We don't need praise junkies. We don't need to make kids into that, but they need the right challenge and the right assistance. So can we get a right challenge, and then can we challenge them there to be the best they can be, but to know where the level is, and that's it. And that's one of the principles of development, challenge. So it's not that your man that's roaring at them, or your man that's going, smiling at them, going, oh, you're great guys. They could be equally, doing a disservice. So coaching is, it's there's more to it than that. But ultimately, it's really simple, because people that get to it know what's important. So if I'm coaching in the morning, under 7 hurling team, what is important, right? The first thing is important is that they love coming up, right? Okay. The next thing is important that they feel psychologically safe there. They feel they can express themselves. Okay, the third thing is important is that they learn to hold the hurl, because it's an object control game where you're trying to control an object with an object. So if the first place they must start is controlling the hurl, the object. Okay, and they're the 3 things I need to achieve. How do I do that then? What is the appropriate challenge then? That's my next challenge. What are the behaviours I'm trying to get into them? I want to create good learners so that they can access the game higher as they go along. But if I don't have the vision or the lenses to have a future focus to understand, well, this now is important here, because it'll lead to that and lead to that and lead to that. It was like, where did John Wooden start? John Wooden, the greatest coach of all. Day 1, season 1, every year, learn how to tie your laces. So, and from that then, that was basketball, so they wouldn't get blisters. That was the starting point. So it's a big challenge for people to come out of any walk of life and to coach well. So I'm not that critical of people, provided their heart's in the right place.
Yeah, well, I suppose in some ways what's happened now is the world has become very politically correct. So that will carry across to all things: sport, work, industry, everything. So whereas in the past, if there was a coach on the sideline giving welly to the youngsters, the parents would go, it's all part of the game. But nowadays, parents might be like, I don't want to talk to my child like that. And I suppose, as you said, you need to nurture them, but you need to challenge them as well. And you can't, it's very hard to find the middle ground, isn't it?
It is. It is. So I think that's how you carry yourself as a coach is really important. So that's that self-awareness part, how you want to be perceived, how you want to treat the weakest, because how you treat how you treat people affects how they treat them. So people can see that over time. But if you're unaware of all of that, if you think this is about the game and baiting it into Johnny today, you don't see that bigger picture, and you'd still have the potential to be a great coach. But you just don't know what you don't know. So there's a Malawian saying, I'm told, I quote these things that I heard years ago, and then I just stay quoting them. But if you don't know what you don't know, then you won't know. But if you do know what you don't know, then you might know. So these people just don't know what they don't know. And if I got a video of them in the morning and I videoed them at a training session and I said, all right, buddy, we're going to sit down here now and watch this, they wouldn't like watching it because they'd know that wasn't great. You know what I mean? So they're still good people. They're still, yeah. But you see, my point, I suppose, in all this really is, in some clubs, it can be a little easier to coach because the environment can support proper coaching behaviours. Whereas in other clubs, tradition will be, this is the way we do it around here, and then you go in and you become them behaviours. Whereas if the same coach went into a different environment where there was a little bit more nuance, a little bit more expertise, and a little more bigger picture, well, they'd probably display different behaviour.
Tell me about the coaches. You said you have a multitude of coaches. Was it easy to get them to come on board, or because sometimes these people are so busy, it's even hard to get to talk to them. Was it hard to get in contact with them?
Yeah, yes and no. Like some people it doesn't matter what you're doing, they're easier to deal with than others, So through my first book, I would have been lucky enough to get good, I met a lot of people and got to know a lot of people. So it's a small country, Ireland, so by degrees I got to a lot of people, or most of them I wanted to. So again, there's a skill in approaching people too, and I learned that as I went along. And so, yeah, I got everyone. I was really lucky. I got a lot of the top people in sport in Ireland. In rugby, I had Stuart Lancaster, Leinster rugby coach. I had Andy Friend, Connacht rugby coach. I had Noel McNamara, the head of the Leinster Academy. Bundy Aki, Joey Carberry, then in hurling. I had Paul Kilgannon, he's Limerick coach. Eamon O'Shea, he's tip coach. And Henry Shefflin, Eddie Brennan. Gaelic football, Donaghy, and I had a lot of the ladies in Nikki Daly's Irish hockey, Valerie McCahey was Cork football, Nadia Powers, an athlete. So they were the more cerebral. And then I got the academics, so the coaching academics from UL, a lot of guys, Dr. Phil Kearney, Ian Sherwin, Dr. Ian Sherwin, Dr. Damien Young, and then I had a lot of my buddies who would be in the professions. Neil O'Toole is an S&C coach. Dave Morris is into analysis. Dave Hanley is a physio. Donny Fox in athletic development and physio. Mike Day, nutritionist. Katie Lydon, Dr. Katie Lydon. She's from my Cullen. So I got all them people. Look at hard work. There was
great.
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah, I mean, it's great that you were able to write that book, and obviously, to have some of those contacts and put them in, because it's in that kind of a book, it's great to see other people's perceptions and how they look at things and how they differ as well. No?
Yeah. Well, I think, the three things I was trying to get was information, insights and inspiration. So that's how I framed it. So that story element is also important. So it's I think it came together nicely. I think it worked well. So so far so good. The book has been
and obviously, because normally when anyone releases a book, they have a book tour and so on. So you've kind of been doing a virtual book tour, I suppose. No.
I don't know. Did I really? I do a lot of the media were good to me. Like Paul Burns is a buddy of mine. He helps me with the media. So I did a good bit of that stuff, and I I haven't really done a book tour. No, no, that's it. Just yeah, I know Paul Burns has done a lot of work for me. He's a great fella, and Paul Burns Media, and so I've gone on well there, and like I've social media there and that stuff, and that drives it on there. And but for me now, the book is out 3 months, and obviously after Christmas, now it's about reconfiguring it, really getting it time to get it to the market, because I think there's it's a huge scope for this book, and for the first book too. So that next layer of detail to bring it to the next level, to evolve it. It's the same thing. It's the same thing. In coaching parlance, I have the same players, so I need to get new strategies and innovate and look for higher levels of performance. Look for new markets and new opportunities. It's the same principles.
Yeah, and so for you said there, obviously you're working on another book as well. So what do you kind of hope to achieve this year?
This year, I'm involved in coaching. I've my own lads. They're now probably under 17, but the majority of them will be under 16. So I'll be coaching my lads. I'm involved with an adult hurling team, so I'll be helping out there. I'll be working on the CARVER corporate framework, the coaching book, so I hope to get that finished as soon as possible. And then I'm working on a few little other projects. So yeah, all them things. I'm working on a couple of diary ideas and stuff like that. So all that stuff, yeah, you wouldn't want to be listing it out too often, or you'd
No.
you'd scare yourself. I won't keep going, because
You'll drive yourself
I won't
mad.
keep talking, because there's probably about
Yeah.
5 other things I'm trying to do at the same time, and I got engaged there, so
No,
I need to.
I think it. Oh, you got
I
engaged.
got engaged at Christmas, so I need to improve or make my lovely lady Lauren even happier than I do already. So that's another area for development, and learning.
You need, now you're multitasking. Now you're really multitasking.
Yeah. So that's there. Look I don't think you can be. I try not to become too self-absorbed or too whatever. So just keep it coming, and I hope the energy and the passion stays up for it. And
Yeah. Well, like I want to thank you for coming on the podcast. And I think in some ways, with these books, you've even though you mightn't consider it kind of brave, but you've gone into a whole new area, because there's not many people doing this or have done this, especially in Ireland. And I think it's a leap of faith as well, because as you said, it was self-study and self-evaluation, and years of experience, whether it be bad or good, has brought you on to write these books. And I think there's going to be a lot in it that's going to help people. I think people are going to take what they will from it, but I think it's definitely, on a really positive note, it's going to help the youth, and help children become better athletes, and help coaches become better coaches. And I think definitely, as you said, with the new book and with the following book you're coming out with, I think in the corporate world, there's a lot of those methods and strategies that will really work. So, I want to say well done, and we want to wish you the best of luck with it in the future.
Thank you, Simon. No, I enjoyed this, because I was a bit, I wouldn't say apprehensive coming on, because normally the stuff I do is just about coaching, and I was thinking, I don't really want to be here talking about myself, because it's not really, like, coaching isn't about being self-serving. Like, ultimately, I'm talking about a servant practice, so you can't really be self-serving in it. So I was kind of thinking, Jesus, am I coming on here talking about myself? But I think we talked a lot about coaching, so I'm kind of pretty happy about it.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, it's always, we have to talk about ourselves, and the things we do, because for me in this podcast, it's about your journey and what brought you to where you are, and what were the methods, and how does somebody become a good coach? So how does somebody become a good podcaster? How does somebody become a good teacher? The thing is, you have to look into what you've done and what you're planning to do. So I mean, I think it was a really interesting interview, and I enjoyed it, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future, when your world of coaching has evolved even more.
Yeah, well, yeah, it will be evolving. Yeah, we're going into new places this year now, and trying to push new limits, and trying to take it to the next level. Like, everything is about the next level for me, because it doesn't matter where you really are if you can just keep bringing it to the next level. And that's the message I'm always trying to get into players I deal with. Like, it doesn't matter where you are. If we all just try and get to the next level, it will be fine. So it's that constant striving that we're into.
That's great. That's great. And, I want to thank you, Paul, again, and we wish you the best and good luck with everything. Take care.
Well, I always end by saying, I don't know why I said it, where I came across it, but Viva la Revolution. Long live the revolution. I always started saying I was trying to start a coaching revolution. That was what I was trying to do. And I probably still am. So, long
Well,
live
you're
the revolution.
doing the right job. You're doing the right job. Good man. Good man. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Paul Kilgannon, and we wish Paul all the best with his new book and future books, and we might have him on the show again sometime in the future. So thanks very much, Paul. Okay, on to our next guest for next week, and that is Jim McKee. So Jim McKee is a professional visual artist and singer-songwriter from County Tyrone, Ireland, who has been deeply inspired by the Burren and the West of Ireland, which has been his spiritual home since 2001. As a recording artist also, extending beyond that of a visual artist, he has performed across Ireland, the UK, France and the USA with his songs, which have also been filmed in films and commercials. So we look forward to talking to Jim next time, and that will be a really interesting conversation, so we hope you tune in for that one. Okay, thank you. Take care, guys.